My name is Ebenezer Thorndike, and at the age of 73, I have had the misfortune to believe that the worst of life is behind me. A widower with a multi-million dollar fortune, the former owner of one of Watford City's most successful jewelry companies, who would have thought that at this age I would be betrayed by the closest person left in my life? My mansion on the north side of town always seemed too big for me. After the death of Agatha, my wife who left this world 5 years ago, 14 rooms became 14 empty spaces filled with the echoes of a past life. At times I thought I could hear her footsteps on the stairs or the clinking of her favorite silver bracelets in the living room. But they were only shadows of memories that an old man can't feed on. Our only son, Randall, married Vera Prescott 10 years ago. I wasn't invited to the wedding. Randall said the ceremony would be modest, for only his closest friends. I found out later that it had cost a lot of money, which I'd paid for without realizing it. Randall was always a master of creating financial problems out of thin air and then finding ways to solve them at the expense of my wallet. As a kid, I wasn't home much. The jewelry business required constant attention, especially when we started expanding. First one store downtown, then three, and by the time I retired, 22 stores across the country. Agatha often chided me for missing important moments in Randall's life. His first steps, his first words, his school holidays. I brushed it off, confident that I was securing his future. What good are sentimental memories if the kid doesn't have a decent inheritance? Randall grew up a withdrawn and cold young man. As a teenager, he began to drift apart, and despite my best efforts to mend the relationship, the gap between us only widened. I thought money would solve the problem, as it always had. I sent him to a prestigious private school, then paid for him to attend the best university in the country. When he dropped out in his third year to find himself, I didn't push. When he launched 3 businesses in a row and went bankrupt, I covered his debts each time. I was convinced that it was my duty as a father to support my son, even if he didn't live up to my expectations. Now looking back, I realized my mistake. I gave Randall everything except what he really needed, my time and attention. Money became the only language we used to communicate. I paid, he took, and it went on for decades. Even when he came to me with another business idea, I saw in his eyes not the enthusiasm of an entrepreneur, but the calculation of a man who knows he will not be refused. After Agatha died, our relationship became even more strained. Randall started showing up at my house only when he needed money. His wife Vera, a thin blonde with a perpetually disgruntled expression, never once bothered to ask about my health or well-being. She was only interested in the antiques in my house, which in her opinion were collecting dust and would be much more appropriate in their city apartment. They visited me about once a month for the past year, usually on the first Sunday. Randall would call in the morning and let me know they would be stopping by for lunch. I prepared for these visits as if for an exam. I asked Penelope to prepare the best dishes, got good wine from the cellar, put on my favorite tweed suit, and then he sat and listened to Randall talk about his new business plans, for the realization of which he needed a little financial support. The last such backing cost me $200,000. Randall had decided to invest in some technology startup that promised to revolutionize the market. I didn't ask for details, just wrote a check. Perhaps I was too soft on him. Perhaps I should have made him stand on his own 2 feet when he was younger. But every time I looked at him, I saw a boy I hadn't gotten to know while I was building my empire. And every time I succumbed to the guilt that gnawed at me from the inside out. Penelope was the real pillar of my life. She came to work for me as a housekeeper 15 years ago, when Agatha had already started to get sick. A reserved, middle-aged woman, she never minded her own business, but was always there when I needed her. When Agatha was gone, it was Penelope who helped me through the first few months of widowhood. She made sure I ate regularly, reminded me to take my medication, and kept the house in order. Gradually, her duties expanded. She was no longer just a housekeeper, but a housekeeper, a personal assistant, and perhaps the only person who really cared about me. Penelope knew all my habits and preferences. She knew that I liked to read business newspapers at breakfast, that I preferred Earl Grey to other kinds of tea, that I hated modern art and adored classical music. She never said too much, but her presence in the house created an air of stability that I appreciated more than I could express. Every morning began the same way. I woke up at 6:30, showered, dressed. By 7, Penelope was serving breakfast in the small dining room. Soft-boiled eggs, buttered toast, fresh orange juice, and tea. After breakfast, I would go to the study and do my business. Although I had sold the business 5 years ago, I still had investments that needed attention. A light lunch at noon, followed by a walk in the garden, weather permitting. Evenings were spent in the library reading or listening to records. The measured, predictable life of a well-to-do old man. But there was something soothing about the routine. After decades of hard work, endless meetings, negotiations, and decisions on which the fate of hundreds of people depended, I finally had the luxury of taking my time. At 73, I had the right to rest. My fortune was estimated at about $20 million. Half was invested in stocks and bonds, a quarter was in bank accounts, and the rest was invested in real estate and art. I wasn't a cheapskate, but I didn't throw money around. I donated to charity, helped former employees if they found themselves in a difficult situation, sometimes spoiled myself with the purchase of a rare book or antique object. But I kept most of my fortune for Randall. Despite our complicated relationship, he was my only child, my flesh and blood. I thought that after I died, he would finally be able to dispose of the money as he saw fit, without having to ask me every time. I hoped it would bring him, if not happiness, at least satisfaction. I had left him almost everything in my will, except a small amount for Penelope, enough for her to live comfortably for the rest of her life. On the morning of the stroke, there was no sign of trouble. I got up as usual, had breakfast, read the paper, then went into the office to work. I was reviewing the quarterly investment reports when I felt a slight dizziness. At first, I didn't think much of it. It happens at my age. But after a few minutes, the dizziness intensified, and dark spots swam in front of my eyes. I tried to get up to call Penelope, but my body suddenly became unruly. My right arm went numb, and I couldn't move my fingers. Then the numbness spread to my right leg. I tried to call for help, but my tongue refused to obey. All I could get out of my mouth was an unintelligible sound. At that moment, the office door opened, and Penelope walked in, carrying a tray with a cup of coffee on it. Seeing me, she instantly realized what was going on. "Mr. Thorndyke, your nose is bleeding." Her voice sounded strangely distant, as if through a column of water. I tried to respond, but I couldn't. I felt my body betraying me, my consciousness slipping away. Penelope rushed to the phone, dialed the emergency number. Her words came in scraps. "A stroke. Emergency. 73 years old." The last thing I remember was Penelope running up to me, supporting me to keep me from falling off the chair, and squeezing my hand tightly. "Hang on, Mr. Thorndyke. The ambulance is on its way. It's going to be all right, you hear? It's going to be all right." And then there was darkness. A deep, all-consuming darkness that I thought at the time would be my last memory in this life. The first thing I felt coming back from the darkness was a sound. The measured beeping of medical equipment, muffled voices, the rustle of footsteps on linoleum. Consciousness returned slowly, as if surfacing from the depths of a dark lake. I tried to open my eyes, but my eyelids wouldn't open. I tried to move my arm to no avail. My body became a disobedient shell in which I was trapped. Panic came over me in a wave, but even my heart couldn't beat faster in response to my terror. The heart rate monitor kept beeping with the same measured frequency. Lockman syndrome, a phrase from some medical article I'd read years ago, came to mind. A condition in which a person is fully conscious but completely paralyzed, except for the ability to blink and occasionally move their eyes. But I couldn't even do that. Gradually, I began to distinguish individual voices and words. Next to my bed, someone was saying, "The condition is stable but no change. We continue supportive therapy. But I must warn you, in cases of deep coma in patients of this age, the prognosis is usually disappointing." It was a male voice, calm and professional, probably a doctor. I strained my hearing, trying to make out the answer. "How long can this condition last?" It was Randall, my son. I could hear the tension in his voice, but not the kind I would expect from a son worried about his father's health. More like impatience, as if he was waiting for a specific answer to a question. It's impossible to say for sure. Some patients come out of a coma after a few days, others after months. There are cases where people are comatose for years. And there are those who— The doctor didn't finish, but the meaning was clear even to me in my condition. You mean he can die without regaining consciousness? That was Faith now. Her voice sounded almost businesslike, without the slightest tinge of sadness. That possibility exists, yes, but there is also a chance that your father will make a full recovery. Medicine knows amazing cases of recovery. And if he does regain consciousness, what would be the consequences? Will he be normal? Randall again. And I caught a strange note in his voice, like he was hoping for a negative answer. After a stroke of this severity, it's common to see neurological impairment. It can be partial paralysis, speech problems, cognitive impairment, but the degree of these impairments can vary from minimal to very severe. Again, it all depends on the individual characteristics of the organism and how successful the rehabilitation will be. There was a pause. I imagined them standing over my bed and looking at me, a lifeless body entangled in wires and tubes. Who was I to them now? A father whose life they were fighting for, or a burden they secretly wished they could get rid of? Doctor, may I ask a question? Of a personal nature? Randall's voice grew quieter, almost confidential. Of course. In such cases, if a patient does not regain consciousness for an extended period of time, are there any legal procedures the relatives can initiate? I mean, for managing his affairs, making decisions on his behalf? So there you have it. Not 24 hours later, and my son is already wondering how to gain control of my finances. If I could, I would chuckle bitterly. Yes, there are legal mechanisms. You can apply to the court to become a temporary guardian if your father's condition is deemed incapacitating, but that would require a medical report and a certain legal procedure. Our lawyer can provide you with more information on this matter. Thank you, doctor. We would like to speak with a lawyer when it is convenient. I will pass on your request. Now, unless you have any further questions, I have other patients to see. Footsteps withdrew. The door closed quietly. Only Randall and Faith remained in the room. I felt someone sit down on the edge of my bed. Judging by the ease of movement, it was Faith. What do you think? Her voice sounded quieter than before, but still just as businesslike. Randall didn't answer for a while. Then I heard a sound like a chair creaking. He probably sat down next to the bed. I don't know. On the one hand, if he goes away without regaining consciousness, it'll be easier. We're the sole heirs, the will is in our favor. But on the other hand, these procedures could take months, and we need the money now. We need to access his accounts while he's in this condition, Vera spoke quickly, as if her thoughts were getting ahead of her words. Did you hear the doctor? If he wakes up, he's likely to be handicapped. In that case, we'll still get custody, just later. Yeah, but that doesn't solve our problem with Morgan. He has to pay back his debt in 2 weeks, or else... Or else what? He'll send in his goons. Stop being so dramatic, Randall. Morgan's a businessman, not a mobster. He'll agree to wait if we show him we're about to get access to your father's millions. Your father's millions. That's how she saw it. Not an inheritance, hard-earned and meant for the family. Just money to spend once the old man passed away. You don't know Morgan, Randall said, a note of irritation in his voice. He's not the waiting type. If your father hadn't refused to help with the mortgage, we wouldn't have had to borrow from Morgan. My father died 5 years ago, and he was as stingy as yours. And anyway, you're the one who went into debt because of your stupid tech startup idea. I told you it was a failure. They started bickering. And in another situation, I probably would have felt sorry for my son for getting such a wife. But now I listen to their bickering with the cold clarity of a man who suddenly saw the truth. They didn't love each other. They didn't love me. The only thing they had in common was a desire to get my money. Okay, let's not fight, Randall finally said in a conciliatory tone. Cry, we need to get our act together. I'll talk to a lawyer, find out what it takes to get custody, and you contact Penelope, tell her we want to get some things out of my father's house, his personal papers, his checkbook, his personal papers, his checkbook, something like that. Penelope, that annoying woman isn't likely to cooperate. She looks at me like I'm about to steal silver spoons. Maybe because you actually took 2 antique vases last time we were at Dad's? There was sarcasm in Randall's voice. They were just collecting dust in his living room. And actually, technically, they're already ours. Not really. As long as Dad's alive, All of his possessions belong to him. Come on, he didn't notice anyway. He doesn't notice much at all these days. Sometimes I think he was already starting to, before the stroke. Maybe he was starting to get dementia. Dementia? Me? I've solved complex financial puzzles every day, managed investments better than many young analysts, and memorized the phone numbers of all my business associates for the last 40 years. Don't exaggerate, he was perfectly sane. Just got more and more stingy as he got older. Remember when he refused to give me money to expand my business last year? Said I had to learn to live within my means. Yeah, that was a shame, especially since he has millions sitting in his accounts that he doesn't even spend. What is saving that kind of money for, if not to help his own children? I listened to their conversation with growing disgust. They spoke of me as an obstacle to wealth, not as someone who had worked all his life to provide a decent life for his family. Anyway, soon it won't matter anymore, Randall sighed. If he doesn't come out of his coma, or if he does, but he's incapacitated, we'll have control of his finances, and then we can solve all our problems. I hope it happens sooner than 2 weeks. Faith seemed to get out of bed, her voice now coming from across the room. I don't even want to think about what will happen if we don't pay Morgan back in time. I'll talk to him, ask for a little more time. Maybe show him my dad's bank statements, so he'll realize that we'll be solvent soon. Good idea. Now let's get out of here. I hate hospitals. They always make me depressed. I heard the sound of a door opening, but then the footsteps stopped. Wait a minute, Randall said. Maybe we should, say goodbye to him. Maybe he can hear us after all. A pause followed, and I could practically picture Faith rolling her eyes. Really? You heard the doctor. He's in a deep coma. He can't hear anything. Yeah, but still. Okay, go ahead if it makes you feel better. I felt a touch on my arm. Randall's warm fingers encircled my palm. Dad. His voice was suddenly softer, almost like when I was a kid, when he'd come to me for comfort after a nightmare. If you can hear me, know that Vera and I will be there for you. We'll take care of everything. You have nothing to worry about. Hypocrite. What a hypocrite. If I could, I'd pull my hand out of his. That's it, let's go, Vera said impatiently. We still have to stop by his house and talk to that Penelope. The door closed, and their footsteps faded into the hallway. I was alone in the silence, broken only by the beeping of the medical equipment. A rage like I'd never felt in my life filled me to the brim. If I could have, I would have screamed, hit dishes, smashed furniture. But instead I lay motionless like a doll, staring at the ceiling with wide-open eyes that couldn't even blink. Time dragged on slowly. The nurses came and went, checking IVs, making some notes in the chart. They spoke to me as they would to a child or a pet, affectionate, but with no expectation of a response. That's it, Mr. Thorndyke. I'm going to change your bandage. You just don't worry. As if I could worry outwardly. Toward evening, at least I assumed it was evening, judging by the change of staff and the dimmed lights, the door of my room opened again. This time the footsteps were different, light but sure. Mr. Thorndyke. It was Penelope's voice, and for the first time in this nightmarish day, I felt something resembling relief. She walked over to the bed and I felt her hand gently touch mine. Mr. Thorndyke, it's me, Penelope. I don't know if you can hear me, but the doctors say that sometimes people in comas can hear, so I'm going to talk to you, okay? Her voice shook, and I realized she was holding back tears. Randall and his wife came by today. They took your checkbook and some papers, said they needed to take care of your financial affairs while you were recovering. I didn't want to give it back, but they're your family and I thought you'd approve. Hell no, I wouldn't approve. I wanted to scream, but could only lie there and listen. I'll come to see you every day, Mr. Thorndyke. I'll read you the papers, tell you the news. The doctors say it may help to stimulate the brain, that's how they put it. Penelope was silent for a moment, then continued more quietly. I've been working for you for 15 years, and in all that time you've never once raised your voice at me, and you've always been fair and generous. When my mother got sick, you gave me a vacation without question, and even helped pay for her treatment. You're a good man, Mr. Thorndyke. Much better than you think you are. If I could cry, I would. Not from self-pity, but from the realization of the bitter irony. A stranger was showing more care and affection than my own son. I brought you something, Penelope continued after a pause. Your reading glasses. Of course you don't need them now, but when you wake up, and you will, Mr. Thorndyke, you'll need them. I'll put them here on the nightstand. I heard a slight clatter as the glasses touched the surface of the bedside table. I also brought your favorite pajamas, that hospital shirt you would definitely not approve of. It's so thin and all tied up in the back. I'll have the nurses change you. Penelope kept talking. About the house, about the garden, about keeping things in order in my absence. Her voice was like an anchor keeping me afloat in this sea of helplessness. She was the only reminder that somewhere out there, beyond the walls of the hospital, my world, my life still existed. When Penelope left, promising to return tomorrow, I was alone with my thoughts. And those thoughts were dark, full of anger and determination. My son and his wife thought I was already dead. They were making plans for my money, for my life. Well, I have a plan too. I'm gonna get out of this state no matter what it takes. I'm coming back. And when I do, they'll regret every word they uttered, thinking I couldn't hear them. The days in the hospital merged into one endless stream of sensations and sounds. I learned to tell time by the hospital schedule. Doctors' morning rounds, IV changes, procedures, nurses' shifts. My body remained motionless, but my mind worked clearer than it ever had in my life. Every conversation, every sound, every touch, everything was registered in my memory with frightening clarity. Penelope came every day, usually in the evening. She would tell me about the weather, the news, how she kept my house in order. Sometimes she read me newspapers or books. Her voice was the only source of warmth in the cold reality of my existence. Randall and Vera appeared less frequently, usually every 2 or 3 days. They chatted briefly with the doctors, inquiring about my condition with ill-concealed impatience. Then when they were alone with me, they began to discuss their plans, sure that I could not hear them. That day they came earlier than usual. I recognized their footsteps before the door opened, the hurried footsteps of Randall and the light tapping of Vera's heels. They came in, and I could smell Vera's perfume, too sweet and cloying. "How is he today?" Randall asked the nurse, who was just finishing changing his IV. "No change, Mr. Thorndyke. Stable, but still in a coma," she replied. "How much longer can this go on?" Vera's voice sounded impatient. "It's hard to say. Some patients stay in a coma for weeks, months, sometimes years." "Years?" Vera couldn't hide her indignation. "But that's unacceptable." "Faith, please," Randall tried to sound conciliatory. "Is there anything that can be done to speed up the process?" Vera continued, already more subdued. "Medicine can't speed up coming out of a coma, Mrs. Thorndyke. All we can do is support the body and hope the brain recovers." "What about the other outcome?" Vera's voice grew quieter. There was a pause. I could almost physically feel the nurse's confusion. "If you're asking about the prognosis, Dr. Hartman is better able to answer that question." "Of course, thank you," Randall quickly interjected. "We'll talk to him." The nurse seemed happy to end this conversation. I heard her close my chart. "If you need anything, press the call button. I'll be at my post." The door opened and closed. Randall and Faith were left alone with me. "Are you crazy?" Randall hissed as soon as the nurse's footsteps died down in the hallway. "You can't ask questions like that directly." "How else would I know? You said yourself we need to be prepared for any outcome. And I don't want to wait years, Randall." I heard him sigh heavily. "I don't want to wait either, but we have to be careful. If people start to think we're rushing things, it might raise suspicions." "What kind of suspicion? He's an old man who had a stroke. No one will be surprised if he doesn't pull through." "Still, let's be careful." "Okay." Faith muttered something in response, then I heard the sound of a bag being opened. "Here, I brought the paperwork from the lawyer. He says the process of getting custody could take anywhere from 1 to 3 months." "3 months? We don't have that much time." "I know, but the good news is that we can apply for temporary guardianship on an emergency basis. To do that, we need a medical opinion that he's incapacitated and confirmation that there are urgent financial issues that need to be addressed." "Urgent financial issues we have, that's for sure," Randall grinned bitterly. Yes, but the lawyer says they should be related to his estate, not our debts. Like having to pay property taxes or something. I heard the rustling of papers. Obviously, they were going through the paperwork. Okay, that can be arranged. What about the medical report? For that, we'll need to talk to his attending physician, Dr. What's his name? Hartman. Yes, Hartman. We need him to confirm that his condition is consistently serious and that there's reason to believe he won't regain consciousness anytime soon. Do you think he'll agree? It's just a medical fact, Randall. He doesn't need to lie, just confirm the obvious. I could feel a wave of rage building up inside me. They were talking about me as if I were an inanimate obstacle to be bypassed. Not as a father, not as a person, just as an obstacle to money. Well, let's talk to Hartman, Randall decided. And then we'll apply for temporary guardianship. If all goes well, we'll have access to his accounts in 2 or 3 weeks. And we'll be able to resolve the Morgan problem, Faith said with relief. He's already started calling 5 times a day. Yeah, and not just the Morgan problem. I think we should seriously consider selling Dad's house. What? Vera sounded surprised. You want to sell the mansion? Why wouldn't I? It's a huge house that's worth several million. Who needs it? Father won't live in it anymore. If he wakes up, which is highly unlikely, we'll put him in a good nursing home. And if he doesn't wake up, then the house will still be ours by inheritance, Vera finished for him. Exactly. And why wait? The house requires constant maintenance costs. Why pay for heating, electricity, a gardener when you can sell it and invest the money in something more profitable? What about this? What's her name? Penelope? What about her? If we sell the house, what happens to her? What difference does it make? Randall sounded annoyed. She's a hired hand, not a family member. She'll find another job. She worked for your father for 15 years. It seems to me she could cause trouble. What kind of trouble could she cause? She has no legal rights. Of course we'll compensate her if we sell the house. That would be fair. But it will be up to us, not her, to decide what to do with her father's property. Faith seemed to hesitate. You're right. Besides, that old mansion is nothing but hemorrhoids. I never understood why your father clung to it after your mother died. Such a huge house for one man. He was always sentimental when it came to things related to Mom, though otherwise practical to the point of stinginess. That's for sure. Remember when he refused to pay for that vacation we took in the Maldives? Said it was a waste of money. And he sat in his dusty mansion, surrounded by things that hadn't changed in years. I listened to them talk about me and couldn't believe it was my son and his wife. Had they really always thought this way? Did all that ostentatious respect and infrequent visits mask such contempt? You know, Randall said thoughtfully, I've been thinking for a long time about suggesting he move into a nursing home. Not for the money, but I just thought he'd be better off there, under supervision, among people. But he always rejected that kind of talk out of hand. Said he'd die in his own home, like Mom. Well, he certainly won't die in his own house now, Vera remarked cruelly, most likely here in the hospital. Faith! There was indignation in Randall's voice, but somehow insincere, as if he were just acting the part of a loving son. What? I'm just telling the truth. Doctors don't make any guarantees, and we have to be prepared for reality. This dumb old man's life is coming to an end. 10 million, and the entire estate will soon be ours. At that moment, something inside me finally broke. If I could move, I would have jumped up and thrown them both off the bed. If I could have spoken, I would have screamed until my voice broke. But instead, all I could do was lie there and listen to them plan my death and divide my possessions. Don't say that, Randall said, but without much heat. He's my father, after all. A father who was never there for you when you needed him. A father who chose his business over his family. A father who refused to help you when you were in trouble. What kind of father is he to you, Randall? Just a biological parent, nothing more. There was a pause. I imagined my son looking at me, lying in a hospital bed, entangled in wires and tubes. What does he see? A father? Or just an obstacle to wealth? You're right, he finally says with bitterness in his voice. He's never been a real father, always put his business before me. And when I asked him for help, he lectured me about self-reliance and financial responsibility, Like I wasn't his son, but some intern at his company. Every word hurt me worse than a stroke. Was I really that bad of a father? I'd always thought I was providing Randall with the best life possible, giving him everything I never had. But in his eyes, it turns out I was a monster. So don't feel guilty, Faith continued, and I heard the chair creak. Apparently, she'd moved closer to Randall. We deserve this inheritance. We've put up with his stinginess and indifference for years. Now it's our turn to live well. Yes, Randall's voice had a new note of determination in it. You're right, we deserve it. So let's not waste any time. Let's talk to Hartman, file for custody, and when we get control of his finances, we'll start by paying off the debt to Morgan and selling the house. What about the jewelry business? But he sold it a few years ago, didn't he? Not exactly. He sold the controlling interest, but he still has 15%. They pay a good dividend, but I think we can sell those shares too. The company's on the upswing now. We'll get a good price. Great. We'll sell the stock, sell the house. What else? He has a collection of rare watches. Some models are worth hundreds of thousands, and antique furniture, paintings, all of which we can sell when we get custody. I listened as they methodically planned to sell off everything I'd been saving and collecting all my life. The watch collection I'd started collecting when I was young. The paintings that Agatha and I had chosen together, traveling to dozens of galleries and auctions. Furniture that had witnessed our entire family life. Beautiful, Vera's voice sounded almost jubilant. By my calculations, all of this, along with the cash in the accounts, will give us about 15 million, maybe even more. Yeah, and no more debt, no more financial problems. We can finally live the life we deserve. And no one will lecture us anymore about how we should spend our money. No one. They fell silent, and I imagined them looking at me with triumph in their eyes. To them, I was already dead. Just a body that was still breathing thanks to the machines. But there was no longer a human being, and there is only the 15 million they had already mentally spent. At that moment, I swore to myself that I would get out of this state. Whatever it takes, an effort of will, a medical miracle, a deal with the devil, I will come back. And when I come back, they'll regret every word I said. By the way, Randall said suddenly, I found his will. And what's in it? As we expected, he leaves almost everything to me. There's a small inheritance for Penelope, $100,000, nothing more. Everything else is for me. Good, no surprises then. No, no surprises. If I could smile, I would. There will be surprises, and lots of them. As soon as I get out of here, the first thing I'm going to do is change my will. Neither Randall nor Faith will get a dime of my fortune. Okay, we have to go, Vera said. I have an appointment with an interior designer at 3. I want to discuss with him a plan to renovate our apartment. Renovations? I thought we said we were moving to the penthouse downtown after we got our inheritance. Of course we will, but it'll take time. In the meantime, we can make our current apartment more comfortable. I'm tired of living like a student dormitory. We don't live like a dormitory, Vera. We have a 3-room apartment in a nice neighborhood. Yes, but with IKEA furniture and no proper repairs, I want something more personable. Fine, do as you please. Just don't forget that until we have access to Dad's money, we need to save money. I remember, don't worry. I just want to have a plan ready when the money comes in. They stood up, and I heard Faith zipping up her bag. Let's go find Dr. Hartman. The sooner we start the process of getting custody, the better. The door opened and closed. Their footsteps faded into the hallway. I was left alone with my thoughts and emotions that raged inside me like a hurricane. Anger, resentment, frustration, all of it overwhelmed me to the brim. I never thought my own son could want me dead, not in a fit of anger or resentment, but calmly, calculatingly, like a business plan. It was betrayal in its purest form, and it hurt deeper than I could have imagined. But in addition to these devastating emotions, another feeling began to stir in me. Determination. A cold, hard determination to survive, to go back and get revenge. Not just punish them by disinheriting them, no. I wanted to see their faces when they realized I'd heard everything. Every word, every plan, every cruel phrase. Revenge is a dish best served cold, they say. Well, I'll have time to cool my rage to absolute zero. And when the time comes, They will feel the full, icy horror of it. It was on the fourth day of my stay in a coma. Though for me, a man trapped in his own body, time had long since lost its meaning. Night changed to day to night, and I could only register these changes by the changing light and the rhythm of hospital life. Nurse Sarah, a full dark-skinned woman with a soft voice and careful movements, had just finished her morning treatments and was leaving the room when I felt it. At first, I thought I was imagining it, a slight tingling in the tip of my right index finger. It was like a tiny electric shock running through my nerve endings. In my position, any sensation in my body felt like a miracle. I concentrated, focusing all my willpower on that finger, trying to repeat the sensation. And, oh my God, I felt the finger shake faintly. It was as if a person who had been deaf for years suddenly heard the distant sound of a bell. A wave of emotion swept over me. I tried again and again to repeat that tiny movement. And though I didn't always succeed, each time I felt that I was regaining control of my finger. At that moment, the door to the room opened, and in walked Dr. Lee, a short woman of Asian appearance with an attentive gaze. My heart, literally this time, beat faster as the heart rate monitor beeped several times. "Mr. Thorndyke?" A note of alarm sounded in Dr. Lee's voice. She stepped closer, shined a flashlight into my eyes, checked the readings on the instruments. I concentrated and tried to blink, to signal to her that I was here, that I could hear, that I was back. But my eyelids remained fixed. I could only move one finger so far, and barely noticeably. Slight increase in heart rate, but that could be a physiological reaction, Dr. Lee muttered to herself. Overall picture is unchanged. She made some notes on my chart and walked out, and I was left alone with my little discovery. My first impulse was to report progress immediately, to show the doctors that I was recovering. But then I remembered everything I'd heard from Randall and Vera, their plans for my fortune, my house, my money, the way they talked about me, about a dumb old man whose life was coming to an end. I remembered their impatience to get custody, to sell off my property, to divide the inheritance. So I decided to wait, to hide my progress until I was fully ready, because my coming out of the coma was to be not only a medical fact, but a carefully planned retaliatory operation. In the following days, I practiced my right hand hard when no one was in the room. At first, I could only move my index finger, then my thumb, then my middle finger. By the end of the week, I could slightly clench and unclench my entire right hand, although the movements remained weak and clumsy. The left side of my body was still unresponsive to my efforts. Randall and Faith visited me every other day. They were confident. Apparently, the guardianship process was well underway. I could hear them discussing meetings with lawyers, gathering paperwork, medical reports. "Hartman says the chances of recovery are minimal," Randall said during one of the visits. "Given his age and general body condition." "That's good for our application," Vera echoed. "The judge needs to understand that temporary custody is necessary. Yes, the lawyer says that with these medical conditions, we have a near 100% chance, especially since I'm the only close relative." When they spoke, I always kept my right hand relaxed so that a casual movement wouldn't give me away. Sometimes it took an incredible effort, especially when they started discussing how my money would be spent. But I held back. The time for exposure had not yet come. I enjoyed Penelope's visits much more. She came every evening after work and spent an hour or more with me. Unlike Randall and Vera, she talked to me like a living person, telling me about her day, about the news, about what was going on in the world outside the hospital walls. "I finally finished the inventory of your library today, Mr. Thorndyke," she said, sitting in the chair next to my bed. "Can you believe you have over 3,000 books in there? I made a complete catalog just like you asked for before you got here." Her voice trembled, but she quickly pulled herself together. "Your son took some rare editions for appraisal, said he needed it for insurance. I wrote down everything. He took 15 books, mostly first editions of classics. Don't worry, everything is under control." I mentally thanked her for that pedantry. Randall had apparently already started to sell off my collection of rare books, which I'd been collecting for over 30 years. Each of those books wasn't just valuable, they were part of my life, my history. Another time, Penelope came in excited. "Mr. Thorndyke, the appraisers from the antique store came to the house today. Randall brought them in, said it was for an insurance policy, but I overheard them talking. They were discussing the market value of your watch collection and several paintings. She was silent for a moment, clearly doubting whether to continue. I don't want to say anything bad about your son, but I think they're getting ready to sell. Randall was asking how quickly buyers could be found and what kind of commission the store would take. It didn't surprise me, but it still hurt. My watch collection is a true passion that I've given decades to. Some pieces I've spent years looking for, flying across the country to get them. And now Randall was going to sell them wholesale without even realizing their true value. I was trying to hint that it might be worthwhile to wait until your condition cleared up. But Randall said he had power of attorney and that he was acting in your best interests. Power of attorney. I remembered that I had indeed given Randall a general power of attorney about a year ago when I was planning an extended trip to Europe, just in case any urgent matters needed to be handled in my absence. The trip didn't materialize because of health problems, but the power of attorney was still in effect. And now Randall was using it to practically rob me while I was in the hospital. I could feel the anger coursing through my veins, giving me new strength. In the moments when no one was in the room, I practiced my arm intensely. By the end of the second week, I could not only clench my hand, but I could raise my arm a few centimeters above the bed. This was tremendous progress, although I still hid it from the doctors and nurses. The medical staff, by the way, surprised me with their dedication and professionalism. I had never thought about the people working in hospitals before. For me, they were faceless masses in white coats. Now I saw each of them as individuals, noticed their personalities, remembered their names. Sarah, a full nurse with a Caribbean accent, was always especially gentle when she changed my underwear or turned me over to avoid bed sores. She would talk to me during procedures, telling me about her children, the weather, the minutiae of hospital life. You know, Mr. Thorndyke, it's so sunny outside today. I think spring has finally sprung. Too bad you can't see the park from your window. The magnolias are blooming there now. But don't worry, as soon as you're feeling better, we can take you out to the garden. We have a lovely patio here for the patients. Nurse Jason, a young guy with tattoos hidden under the sleeves of his uniform, was in charge of physical therapy exercises. Every day he came in and methodically worked my joints to prevent muscle atrophy. His strong hands gently bent and unbent my knees, elbows, wrists. Okay, Mr. Thorndyke, today you and I will do 10 reps per joint. We need to keep your muscles toned so that when you wake up, your rehab will be quicker. Don't worry, I'll do it carefully. Dr. Lee, my attending physician, was short on words but incredibly attentive. She scrutinized all the vitals, checking pupil responses, reflexes. Occasionally, I heard her dictating her observations to be recorded in the chart. Patient Thorndyke, age 73. 14th day of coma after ischemic stroke. General condition stable. Hemodynamics unchanged. Reflexes are reduced but present. He reacts minimally to painful stimuli. Electroencephalogram shows some brain activity, but the pattern is consistent with a comatose state. And then there was Dr. Klein, the neurologist who consulted on my case, a somewhat eccentric middle-aged man. He often spoke to me as if I could hear and understand him. You see, Mr. Thorndyke, there are a lot of white spots in neurology. We still don't fully understand what happens in the brain of a person in a coma. Some patients say they can hear everything that's going on around them. Others don't remember anything. There are even cases where people who were thought to be in a vegetative state for years suddenly began to communicate with the help of special devices. So I always assume that you can hear me, even if my colleagues think I'm a crank. I was grateful to him for this stance. It was thanks to Dr. Klein that the nurses and other doctors always warned me before procedures, explaining what they were going to do, even if they thought I couldn't hear them. On my 15th day in the hospital, Penelope brought particularly disturbing news. Mr. Thorndyke, I'm sorry to bring this up, but Randall has been granted temporary guardianship. He showed me the paperwork. He can now manage your finances and property on your behalf. He's already begun to act. She was silent, as if gathering her thoughts. Yesterday, he held a meeting with representatives of an auction house. They'll be selling your watch collection and some paintings. Randall said it was necessary to pay for your medical treatment, but, Mr. Thorndyke, you have health insurance that covers all expenses. I've seen the policy. So it began. Randall got what he wanted, legal access to my condition. He also fired the gardener and said I only had to come 3 times a week instead of every day like I used to. Said I needed to cut back on expenses. Penelope's voice trembled, and I felt her gently take my hand. But you don't have to worry. I'll still come in every day, just without paying for the extra days. The house shouldn't stand unattended. I was touched by her devotion. In a world where my own son had betrayed me, this woman I'd hired 15 years ago as a simple housekeeper showed more care and loyalty than my own blood. Also, Randall was asking about the safe in your office. He knows that important documents and possibly cash are kept there. I said I didn't know the combination, and that's true. But he seemed, very insistent. Said he'd call in the experts to open the safe if he needed to. The safe held more than just documents and money. There was Agatha's jewelry box, the family jewelry she wanted to give to our future daughter-in-law when Randall found a decent girl. Of course, Faith didn't fit Agatha's idea of a worthy daughter-in-law, and I never gave her the jewelry. Now I realized I'd done the right thing. Also in the safe was my diary, an old-fashioned leather-bound book in which I had written down important thoughts and events over the past 20 years. That book contained a lot of personal stuff, my hopes, my disappointments, my thoughts about Randall and our complicated relationship history. The thought of him reading these notes gave me mixed feelings. Perhaps it would help him understand me better. But more likely, he'd just flip through the pages looking for information about hidden assets or secret accounts. I'll try to talk him out of opening the safe somehow, Penelope continued. I'll tell him you'd be very upset. I'm not sure that would work, though. I mentally thanked her for her concern. If I could have spoken, I would have told her that the combination to the safe was Agatha's birth date and that there was nothing there that could interfere with my plans for revenge. But my lips remained still, and I could only listen to her worried voice. One last thing, Mr. Thorndyke. Randall says he plans to meet with the real estate agents next week. It seems he's serious about selling the house. This news, though expected, still hit me like a shoe on the head. The house where Agatha and I had lived all our married life, where Randall had been born and raised, where every corner held memories. He was going to sell it before I died. When Penelope left, I was alone with my thoughts and feelings, rage and pain mixed together, forming a rattling mixture that gave me the strength to recover. I had to get out of this state as soon as possible before Randall had time to sell my life off him piece by piece. That night, when no one was in the room, I made a new discovery. I could lift my eyelids slightly. Not fully open my eyes, but enough to see the blurry outline of the room through the narrow slit. It was another step toward regaining control of my body. I firmly decided that I would not give myself away until I could speak and move well enough that my ability to do so was not in doubt. I needed to return not as a helpless invalid dependent on my son's mercy, but as a person capable of making decisions and asserting my rights. Meanwhile, my hearing remained my primary tool. I listened to the conversations of doctors, nurses, visitors, gathering information, putting together the mosaic of what was happening around me. Dr. Lee and Dr. Klein, unaware of my partial recovery, were discussing my case at my bedside. His EEG shows some changes, Dr. Lee said, looking over some papers. Brain activity has increased, especially in the speech centers. That's a good sign, Klein replied. Perhaps the recovery process is beginning. But given his age and the time he spent in a coma, even if he wakes up, the likelihood of a full recovery? I know, but there have been some amazing cases in my practice. The human brain is capable of incredible things, especially when its owner has a strong will to live. Well, let's hope Mr. Thorndyke is one of those people. Oh, Dr. Klein had no idea how right he was. I had the will to live, and also the will for revenge, which proved to be an equally strong incentive for recovery. At the end of my 3rd week in the hospital, I decided it was time to act. Every day I delayed meant that Randall would sell off more of my possessions while I lay helpless in a hospital bed. I learned from Penelope that the watch collection had already been sold at auction for a ridiculous amount of money, as she put it. The paintings were being prepared for sale, and real estate agents were already looking at the house. My physical condition had improved considerably, although I carefully concealed this from the staff. I could move my right arm almost freely, the fingers of my left hand began to respond to mental commands, and I even found myself able to turn my head slightly when no one was in the room. My eyelids were obeying now too, and I could open my eyes enough to see through the narrow slit without being seen. Speech was worse. When I tried to utter a word, I could only mumble. My tongue moved with difficulty, like a foreign piece of meat in my mouth. But I did not give up and practiced the muscles of my face and tongue when I was alone. Choosing the right moment to wake up was not easy. I wanted a doctor around to witness my return, but not Randall or Faith. I needed time to gather my strength and prepare to face the traitors before they learned of my miraculous recovery. The chance presented itself on Wednesday morning. Dr. Lee came in for rounds accompanied by a young resident whose name I didn't know. She usually checked the readings on the instruments, examined me, and quietly dictated her observations to the assistant. That day I felt particularly well. I'd managed to get a few hours of real sleep during the night, not half asleep, and I woke up with a clear head and a firm resolve. Dr. Lee leaned over me, shining a flashlight into my eyes, checking the reaction of my pupils. I chose that moment. Slowly, with the utmost concentration, I opened my eyes not ajar, as I'd sneakily done before, but fully open and stared directly into Dr. Lee's face. The effect was instantaneous. She recoiled, almost dropping the flashlight. "Mr. Thorndyke!" Amazement sounded in her voice. I concentrated on blinking, deliberately, controlled, letting her know it wasn't just a reflex. "Has he come to his senses?" whispered a resident behind her back. Dr. Lee quickly pulled herself together. "Mr. Thorndyke, if you can hear me, blink again." I blinked. "Unbelievable!" She exhaled, then turned to the resident. "Quickly get Dr. Klein in here and check his vitals. Blood pressure, pulse, write everything down." Then she turned to me again, in a calmer, more professional tone. "Mr. Thorndyke, my name is Dr. Lee. You're at Watford Memorial Hospital. You had a stroke and have been in a coma for almost 3 weeks. Please don't try to move abruptly or speak. That may be difficult right now. Just blink. Once for yes, twice for no. Do you understand me?" I blinked once. "Great. Are you experiencing pain?" 2 blinks. "Good. I'm going to check your reflexes and motor functions now. It may be uncomfortable, but it won't hurt. Are you ready?" 1 blink. The next minutes became a kaleidoscope of actions and sounds. Dr. Lee tested my reflexes, my reaction to touch, my ability to move my limbs. I deliberately held back and showed only the bare minimum of ability, moved the fingers of my right hand slightly, turned my head slightly. I didn't want her to realize how much control I'd actually regained over my body. Soon Dr. Klein burst into the room, excited, his hair disheveled, as if he'd come running from the other end of the hospital. "Has he really regained consciousness? Is his consciousness clear? Is he responding to commands?" The questions poured out of him like peas from a punching bag. "Yes, consciousness is clear. There is response to external stimuli, minimal motor activity in the right arm." Dr. Lee spoke clearly and professionally, but I could hear a hint of worry in her voice. Dr. Klein leaned toward me, his eyes shining with an almost childlike delight. "Mr. Thorndyke, welcome back. I knew you were stronger than you look." Then he turned to Dr. Lee. "We need to start a full examination immediately. CT scan, MRI, full neurological exam. And call his family. They need to know." At the mention of family, I tensed up, and apparently it was reflected on the monitors. My pulse line jumped. "Is something wrong, Mr. Thorndyke?" Dr. Lee noticed the change. I didn't know how to convey to them that I didn't want to see Randall and Vera right now. I wasn't ready for this meeting. "Maybe we should do an examination first," Dr. Klein suggested, misinterpreting my reaction. "Let him get used to it a little before we give him an emotional meeting with his family." I blinked once, grateful for the suggestion. "Okay, check up first," Dr. Lee agreed. "But the family still needs to be notified. I'll call them after we're done with the diagnostics." The next few hours passed in endless tests and procedures. I was wheeled around different hospital departments on a gurney, brain scans, blood draws, reflexes, and muscle tone tests. I patiently endured it all, focusing on the main task of regaining control of my life. To my surprise, speech began to return faster than I expected. By noon, I could already pronounce individual words, barely mispronounce, but still recognizable. "Woe da" was the first word I squeezed out when I felt thirsty. The young nurse helping me at that moment brightened as if I had spoken the greatest wisdom in the world. Of course, Mr. Thorndyke. Here you go. She brought a glass with a pipe to my lips. The water seemed to me more delicious than the most expensive wine. I drank in small sips, savoring the simple sensation of the cool liquid sliding down my parched throat. By mid-afternoon, Dr. Klein had assembled a panel of doctors to discuss the results of the examinations. They talked among themselves at my bedside, clearly unaware that I understood much more than I was showing. The brain damage is less extensive than we originally thought, Klein said, showing me something on the scans. You can see areas of ischemia here and here, but much of the speech and motor centers have retained activity. Amazing, considering his age and the severity of the stroke, one of the doctors remarked. Full recovery is unlikely, Dr. Lee said cautiously. But the degree of rehabilitation can be quite substantial with the right therapy. I wouldn't be so pessimistic, Klein shook his head. In my practice, I've seen cases where patients have recovered almost completely from conditions that seem hopeless. They continued to discuss my treatment and rehabilitation plans, and I listened, mentally assessing my chances. I needed to recover enough to be considered capable, to have the legal right to dispose of my property, to sign documents, to change my will. But from the looks of it, that would take time, weeks or even months of intensive therapy. Time I didn't have. Every day of procrastination meant Randall had time to sell off another part of my life. Notarius, I struggled to utter as the doctors finished their concilium, and only Dr. Klein remained in the room. He turned to me in surprise. What did you say, Mr. Thorndyke? Notarius. I need a notarius. I pushed the words out one at a time, with long pauses, but intelligible enough for him to understand. A notary? You want to see a notary? Klein frowned. But now is not the time for legal matters. You need to focus on getting better. I shook my head with as much determination as I could portray. Wah-wah, very wah-wah. Dr. Klein looked at me carefully, and I saw a flicker of understanding in his gaze. Does this have to do with your son getting custody? Is that what you're worried about? I blinked once. I understand, but you know he had every right to do it. You were in a coma. Someone had to make decisions. My house, my stuff. He's pro-selling. The sentence came with great difficulty, but I had to explain. Klein looked puzzled. Your son is selling your possessions? Are you sure? Yes, the short word came out almost cleanly. The doctor hesitated, rubbing his chin. Mr. Thorndyke, I am not a lawyer, but I believe that if you have recovered and retained a clear mind, the guardianship should be reviewed. However, that would require a medical opinion of your capacity, and right now, I'm afraid we can't give one. I could feel the frustration and anger rising within me. Was I really this close, and I was still going to lose? But if you insist on seeing a notary, I see no reason to refuse. I just have to warn you that any documents you sign in your current state can be challenged in court. That was better than nothing. I nodded as best I could. Okay. Do you have a specific person you want to contact? Harvey Silverman, I said the name of my notary, someone I'd worked with for 20 years. Good, I'll pass that information on to your nurse. Now, Mr. Thorndyke, I strongly suggest you get some rest. Today has been a very eventful day, and you need your strength to recover. He was right. Despite my best efforts to appear stronger, I felt exhausted. My body, which had been inactive for so long, was now demanding rest after exertion. But I wasn't getting any rest. No sooner had Dr. Klein left the room than Randall and Vera burst through the door, panting and with a look of concern on their faces. Daddy, Randall exclaimed, rushing toward my bed. You're awake. Thank God. I stared at him with an impenetrable expression, trying to hide the storm of emotion that raged inside. Here he was, the man who wanted me dead, who had sold my stuff while I lay in a coma, who had spoken of me as a dumb old man. And now he stood in front of me, posing as a loving son. We were so worried, Vera picked up, standing beside him. The doctors said the chances were minimal, but we always believed you'd make it. Hypocrites. What hypocrites? I wanted to scream in their faces everything I thought of them. Tell them I'd heard every word they said, every plan they had. But I held back. The time for exposure had not yet come. Right now I had a role to play. The role of an old man who couldn't remember anything about the time he'd spent in a coma. Randall. I said his name as if I wasn't sure who was in front of me. Yes, Dad, it's me. Randall, your son. He grabbed my hand, squeezing it in his palms. Do you recognize me? Yeah, where am I? In the hospital, Dad. You had a stroke. You were in a coma for almost 3 weeks. Vera and I came to see you every day, talking to you, holding your hand. What a brazen lie. They came only 2 or 3 times a week, and not for long, and they never talked to me, only among themselves. About my money, about my property, about how they would spend my inheritance. I don't remember. I pretended to try to remember. Don't remember anything after I collapsed in the study. That's normal, Mr. Thorndyke, interjected Dr. Lee, who entered the room next. Amnesia often accompanies conditions like yours. Memory may or may not return gradually. I noticed the look of relief on Randall and Vera's faces. Surely it was to their advantage that I remembered nothing. Not their infrequent visits, not their talk of selling my property. I'm so glad you're back with us, Dad. Randall continued to play the role of loving son. I've already started getting the house ready for your return. We'll make repairs to your room, install special equipment for rehabilitation. What house? I decided to check it out. Well, like what kind? Your house, of course. But you're selling it? I deliberately pretended to be confused. Randall froze for a moment, then laughed nervously. What are you talking about, Dad? What makes you think I'm selling your house? It's your house, your property. I would never. I've been told. I paused as if trying to remember. Someone said, Mr. Thorndyke, you may be confusing reality with dreams or something you imagined during your coma. Dr. Lee suggested gently. That happens a lot when coming out of a coma. Yes, Dad, I would never have sold your house without your permission. Randall feigned offended innocence. Sure, I had to take over managing your finances while you were in a coma. Bills had to be paid, papers had to be signed, but it was all temporary until you recovered. I stared at him, trying not to betray my disgust. He was lying to my face without blinking an eye, and if I really didn't remember anything, I might have believed him. I'm tired, I muttered, closing my eyes. It wasn't an act. I really did feel exhausted from all the events of the day and the need to contain my true emotions. Of course you need to rest. Randall stroked my arm. We'll come back tomorrow. For now, get your strength back, Dad. Everything's going to be okay, I promise. I heard them leave the room, and only then did I allow myself to open my eyes. Dr. Lee was still nearby, checking the readings on the monitors. No Tarius, I reminded her. Please. She nodded. I'll pass on your request. But right now, you really need to rest. Your body has been through a serious ordeal, and recovery requires strength. I didn't argue. I really needed to gain strength for the upcoming battle, because this was exactly the battle, for my independence, for my property, for my life, and I wasn't going to lose. The next morning began with a visit from the physical therapist, a young, energetic woman named Jessica, who came in to begin my rehabilitation. We'll start with the most basic exercises today, Mr. Thorndyke, she said as she helped me sit up in bed. First, we'll strengthen the muscles of the arms and neck, then gradually move on to the torso and legs. I obeyed her commands, performed the exercises she showed me, and noted with satisfaction that my body was obeying better than I had expected. My secret workouts on days when I pretended to be comatose were paying off. Well done, Mr. Thorndyke. You're making amazing progress for someone who just came out of a coma yesterday. Jessica was clearly impressed. If you keep this up, you should be able to get out of bed soon. After physical therapy, the speech therapist came in, an older man with a neat gray beard. We worked on pronouncing simple words and phrases, and I diligently did all his exercises, realizing that speech was my main tool for regaining control of my life. By noon, I was visited by a notary, Harvey Silverman, a short, full man with a balding head and penetrating eyes. We'd worked with him for over 20 years, and he knew everything about my affairs. Mr. Thorndyke, it's good to see you awake, he said, sitting down next to the bed. Dr. Klein has informed me of your request. What can I do to help? My will, I said slowly, but already more clearly than yesterday. I want to change it. Silverman frowned. Are you sure it's a good idea to change your will right after you come out of your coma? Documents like that are easy to challenge if someone questions your capacity. I'm sure. I looked him straight in the eye. Very important. Randall is selling my stuff. Yes, I know, Silverman nodded. He's been consulting with me about selling some assets. As your temporary guardian, he has that right. But of course, if you're capable of acting again, I'm of sound mind, I said firmly. I want to change the will and revoke the guardianship. Silverman hesitated, tapping his fingers on his leather briefcase. There might be a problem with revoking the guardianship. It would require a medical opinion of your capacity, and judging by your condition, then first, the will. Okay, I'll prepare a new one. What changes do you want to make? The next 2 weeks were spent working hard on recovery, physical therapy, speech therapy, consultations with neurologists. My life became an endless series of medical procedures. I gave my best, realizing that each day brought me closer to my main goal: complete independence and the ability to control my own destiny. My progress surprised the doctors. My speech came back faster than expected. By the end of the second week, I could speak almost normally, although sometimes I stammered on difficult words. My right hand functioned almost fully, my left hand, with some limitations, but it became more and more obedient every day. I learned to sit without support and then to stand, supported by a walker. Terrific progress, Mr. Thorndyke, Dr. Klein said as he reviewed my test results. If this keeps up, we should be able to let you go home in a month. Randall and Faith visited me daily, continuing to play the roles of caring relatives. Randall brought fruit and magazines. Vera told me city news and gossip. They spoke to me condescendingly, as if to a child, clearly not believing in my full recovery. And of course, they never mentioned a word about selling my things. I played the part too, the kind, somewhat absent-minded old man who remembers nothing of the time he spent in a coma and is immensely grateful to his son for his care. At times, I was physically sick of this pretense, but I understood the need to keep up appearances until the very end. Meanwhile, Harvey Silverman had done his part. The new will was ready and waiting for my signature. I made an appointment, a meeting with him the day after Dr. Klein finally signed off on my competency, which was the 18th day after my awakening. Are you sure you want to do this? Silverman asked, spreading out the paperwork on the table by my hospital bed. It's a radical change, Mr. Thorndyke. Absolutely certain, I said slowly but firmly. I've thought it over. The new will was indeed radical. Randall and Vera received nothing but a token amount of $1,000. To Penelope, I was leaving $2 million in a house, not a mansion, but a small cottage on the outskirts of town that was set up as an investment property. A large part of the fortune, $5 million, was allocated to create a named fund at Watford Memorial Hospital, with the stipulation that part of the money would go to personal bonuses to the staff of the neurological department, which took care of me. I distributed the remaining money among the various charities I had supported during Agatha's lifetime. As for the mansion, Silverman clarified, to sell it, I had already made that decision. After my death, the money to the foundation. The house I'd lived in most of my life had become a symbol of the past for me, a past I was ready to part with. It still seemed empty without Agatha, and after Randall's betrayal, it still seemed desecrated. I've also prepared the paperwork to revoke custody. Silverman pulled out another folder. With Dr. Klein's report and your current ability to clearly express your will, the court should grant the petition. I nodded and signed all the documents, slowly but legibly. With each stroke of the pen, I felt the control of my life return to my hands. When will you file the paperwork? I asked when we were done. Today. The decision to revoke guardianship should be made within 3 business days, given the medical opinion. As for the will, it goes into effect immediately and supersedes the previous one. That evening, Penelope visited me. She came less often than before. Randall had really cut back on her hours, and she had to find additional part-time work. Still, she made time to visit me. Mr. Thorndyke, you're looking much better. She was genuinely pleased to see me sitting in a chair instead of lying in bed. Feeling better, Penelope? Sit down. We need to talk. She obediently lowered herself into the chair beside me, and I looked at this woman carefully, the one person who had shown me genuine concern all these years. Penelope, I heard everything. When I was in a coma, her eyes widened in surprise. You heard the whole time? Yes, every word. Your stories about the house, the weather, your books. Randall and Vera's plans too. She turned pale and lowered her eyes. Mr. Thorndyke, I wanted to tell you, but I was afraid it would upset you in your condition. They, they sold many of your things. A watch collection, some paintings, rare books. I know, but that doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that you stayed loyal to me when everyone else betrayed me. I reached out and covered her palm with mine. I changed my will today. You'll get enough to never work again if you don't want to. And the house, that little cottage on Maple Street, it's fully paid for and in good condition. Penelope looked at me with a mixture of shock and embarrassment. Mr. Thorndyke, I don't deserve. You do deserve it, more than anyone. You were there for me when my own flesh and blood wanted me dead. She didn't argue, just nodded, and I saw tears in her eyes. Thank you, but what will happen to you? When will you be discharged? Where will you go? To the mansion, of course. It's still mine, and I intend to live there as long as I want. Randall no longer has the right to dispose of my property. The guardianship will be revoked in the next few days. Penelope smiled through her tears. I'm so glad. I will continue to work for you, if that's okay with you, just like before. Nothing will be like before, Penelope, but I'll be glad if you stay. 3 days later, just as Silverman had promised, the court revoked Randall's custody. My son didn't hear about it from me. He got the official notice. He rushed to the hospital in a rage, barely able to contain himself. What's this all about? He waved papers in front of my face. Why did you file to have custody revoked? I took care of your affairs while you were incapacitated. Taking care? I looked at him calmly. Is that what you call selling off my estate? I acted in your best interest. Those things were just dust and the money could have been invested more profitably. Sure, especially in your next failed business or your renovations. Randall froze, clearly not understanding how I knew such details. I don't know what you mean. You understand everything, Randall, but this is not the time or place for this conversation. Let's put it off until after I'm discharged. I'm planning a small family dinner. You and Faith are invited. He eyed me suspiciously but nodded. Okay, when are you being discharged? Friday. Dinner will be Saturday, 7 o'clock at night. Penelope will prepare everything. Randall walked away puzzled and clearly worried. I smiled at him. He didn't yet understand what was coming, but he already sensed the danger. I was finally released from the hospital on Friday. I could walk with a cane, spoke almost normally, and the doctors were pleased with my progress. Before I left, I personally thanked every member of the staff who had cared for me and announced my decision to establish a foundation at the hospital. You all deserve more than you get, I told them. Come on, and I want some of the funds to go specifically to you, not just for equipment or research, but to you personally, to the people who do this work with such compassion. Dr. Klein, touched, shook my hand. Mr. Thorndyke, that's an incredibly generous gesture. We were just doing our job. You were doing much more than that. You were bringing me back to life, not just physically, but spiritually. And I will never forget that. Penelope met me at the hospital entrance and helped me into a cab. We drove in silence, each of us thinking about something else. I looked out the window at the passing city and realized that I saw it in a new way, as if I had a second chance, a new life. The mansion greeted me with silence and slight neglect. Despite Penelope's efforts, it was obvious that the full care of such a large house was not something she could do alone, especially with the reduced hours. But I didn't care. I didn't plan on staying here for long. After I finished what I had started, I was going to travel, maybe even move to another city. A fresh start. Saturday night came faster than I expected. Penelope had outdone herself by preparing a dinner worthy of a royal reception. Roast duck with oranges, grilled vegetables, fresh bread from the best bakery in town, and for dessert, the apple pie that Agatha loved so much. Randall and Vera arrived exactly at 7, both dressed with a pretension of solemnity. Vera had even brought a bouquet of flowers, the first such gesture in all the years we'd known each other. Dad, you look great. Randall hugged me with feigned warmth. It's just amazing how quickly you've recovered. Yes, nature gives us incredible opportunities to heal. I smiled as I accepted their congratulations and invited them to the table. The first part of dinner was small talk. We talked about the weather, the latest city news, and my treatment. I played the part of gracious host, offering refills, inquiring about their affairs. Randall and Vera gradually relaxed, seeing my complacent mood. It wasn't until Penelope served dessert and coffee that I decided it was time. Randall, Faith, I set my fork aside and looked at them directly. I want to talk to you about what happened while I was in the coma. They looked over at me, concern flashing across their faces. Dad, I thought you said you didn't remember anything, Randall began. I lied, I replied simply. I remember everything, or rather not remember, but know because I heard every word spoken in my room. The color drained from their faces. Faith clutched at her napkin so tightly that her knuckles turned white. I don't know what you mean. Randall tried, but I held up my hand, stopping him. Don't bother. I heard you discussing the sale of my house, my collections, my stock. How you said that dumb old man's life is coming to an end. 10 million and all the property will soon be yours. I've heard it all, Randall. Everyone. Damn it. Word. A heavy silence hung in the dining room. I could see Randall trying to pick out an answer, his brain working feverishly, looking for a way out. Dad, you don't understand, he finally uttered. We were desperate. The doctors said there was almost no chance. We didn't know what to do. Desperate? I grinned bitterly. No, it wasn't desperation. It was greed. You couldn't wait until I was dead to get your hands on my money. You were already selling off my belongings while I was in the hospital. We were acting in your best interest, Vera shrieked. Those old clocks, the paintings, they meant nothing to you. Didn't mean anything? My turn to raise my voice. Every one of those things was part of my life. The watches I collected over decades, the books I read with Agatha, the paintings we picked out together. How can you say they meant nothing to me? Randall tried to take a different tone, more conciliatory. Dad, we made a mistake. We admit it. We were wrong. But we're your family, the only family you have. We can start over. Forget this misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? I laughed, but there was no mirth in that laugh. You call it a misunderstanding that you waited for me to die? That you sold my life off piecemeal while I was helpless? No, Randall, that's not a misunderstanding. It's a betrayal, and it must be paid for. I pulled an envelope from my pocket and placed it on the table. Here's a copy of my new will. I signed it last week, in my right mind and good judgment, in the presence of a notary and 2 witnesses. The original is kept by Harvey Silverman. Randall grabbed the envelope with trembling hands, tore it open, and began to read. Faith peered over his shoulder, her face growing more tense with each line. This is ridiculous. Aunt, Randall finally blurted out. You can't disinherit us. We're your family. My family? I shook my head. No, Randall. Family is the people who love you and care about you. People who want you to live, not wait for you to die for money. Penelope has shown more care and loyalty than you have in your entire life. She deserves that money. We'll contest that will. Faith jumped up from her seat, her eyes throwing lightning bolts. You were incapacitated. It's invalid. Try me, I shrugged. I have a medical report of full capacity signed by 2 doctors. I have a videotape of me signing the will where I clearly state my motives. And I have witnesses, Harvey Silverman and Dr. Klein, respected people in our town. So, good luck in court. Randall looked at me with hatred, an unconcealed, fierce hatred that he no longer tried to hide. You've always been like this, he gritted through his teeth. Always controlling, always dictating terms. Money was the only thing you ever cared about, and now you're using it to punish us. No, Randall, I shook my head. The money was the only thing you cared about, so much so that you were willing to wish your own father dead. And I cared about family, a real family. I tried to build it for you, to give you everything I was missing, but somewhere along the way, I made a mistake, and now we're both paying for it. Faith grabbed her purse. Come on, Randall. There's nothing more to talk about here. Randall stood up, still clutching the will in his hand. You're going to regret this, father. You're left alone, an old man who turned his back on his own son for the sake of pride. Not for pride, Randall, for the sake of justice. And I'm not alone. I have people who really care about me. I just realized it late. They left, slamming the front door loudly. I remained seated at the table, feeling strangely empty, and at the same time, liberated. Penelope quietly entered the dining room and began putting away the dishes. You did well, Mr. Thorndyke, she said quietly. They deserved it. Maybe they did. But you know, Penelope, I don't feel any triumph or satisfaction, only sadness for all these lost years, for all the missed opportunities. She put a hand on my shoulder. Not all is lost yet. You have many years ahead of you. You're a strong person. You beat the stroke. You beat death. You can start over. I covered her hand with mine and nodded gratefully. You're right, and I know where to start. The next morning, I asked Penelope to bring me my laptop and started planning a trip, the same one I'd put off a year ago due to health issues. Europe, Asia, maybe even Australia. Places Agatha and I had always wanted to visit, but kept putting off until later. Will you come with me, Penelope? I asked, showing her the itinerary options. I'll need an assistant, and you could use a vacation. She smiled, the first time I'd seen her truly joyful smile since we'd known each other. My pleasure, Mr. Thorndyke. Anywhere you say. I looked out the window at my garden, at the city in the distance, at the sky, which seemed especially blue on this day. You know, I think that stroke was the best thing that's happened to me in a long time, I said thoughtfully. It made me see the truth about the people around me, about my life, about what really matters. And what is important, Mr. Thorndyke? Not money, not things, not status. It's the people that matter, the ones who stay with you in your darkest moments, the ones who see you as a person, not a source of profit. I've spent my life accumulating wealth, and I've forgotten what truly makes us rich. Relationships, caring, love. Penelope nodded. It's never too late to realize that. Yes, it's never too late, and I intend to make up for lost time. I closed the laptop and stood up, leaning on my cane. Despite all the losses, the collection, the relationship with my son, my health, I felt richer than ever. Richer in experience, in understanding, in freedom. Penelope, please book 2 tickets for next week. Paris first, then we'll see. And call Dr. Klein. I want him to check on me before I leave. She nodded and walked out, and I went to the window, looking out at my garden, which I would soon leave behind. Life went on, a new life in which I was no longer a prisoner of my money, my past, or the expectations of others. A life I intended to live to the fullest despite my age and recent stroke. After all, sometimes you have to lose almost everything to realize that you have the most important thing of all. Another day, another chance, another opportunity to start over.